Hello, and welcome to Stowe Talks, a series of videos designed to support people going through a relationship breakdown and all of the challenges this brings. I'm Matthew Taylor.
And I'm Lisa Gatchell, family lawyers at Stowe Family Law. And in each episode, we bring in some of the amazing professionals we work with so they can share their advice and expertise on a range of issues from co-parenting to financial advice to dealing with challenging ex-partners.
Today, we are joined by special guest Dr Supriya McKenna, a highly experienced specialist narcissism expert who works specifically with the victims of narcissistic relationships, including in the area of separation and divorce. Supriya qualified as a medical doctor in 1994 and then went on to train and work as a GP. After a break to take care of her children, in 2017 she built upon her experience by training in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and personal performance coaching with the Coaching Academy. Today, Supriya focuses on educating the general public and family lawyers on narcissism and giving practical support, coaching and mentoring to the victims of narcissistic relationships, helping them to come to terms with and understand what has happened to them and how to move forwards in their lives.
She also works alongside family lawyers, helping to put the control firmly back in the hands of the non-narcissistic spouse, with the aim of preventing legal costs from spiralling out of control, and has hands-on experience of the UK family court system, understanding its limitations and the challenges involved. Supriya is also co-author to two highly successful books, Divorcing a Narcissist, The Lure, the Loss and the Law, and Narcissism and Family Law, A Practitioner's Guide, and co-hosts a successful podcast, Narcissists in Divorce, The Lure, the Loss and the Law.
Welcome, Supriya, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.
So, as a starting point, it feels like the term narcissism is thrown around quite a lot these days. Can you tell us a little bit about narcissism, about the term, and why we hear so much about it?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a really commonly used word now. And there are issues with that, actually, because today we seem to use the word in a kind of colloquial sense to mean anyone who's a bit vain, anyone who's a bit selfish, anyone who's a bit mean, anyone who drives a flashy sports car, takes a lot of selfies, posts them on Instagram, or even people who just wear sort of designer clothes the whole time. And unfortunately, using the term narcissism in this way actually undermines the seriousness of what true narcissism is, because real narcissism is narcissistic personality disorder. And that's actually what I'm talking about. When I use the word narcissism, when I use the word narcissist, I'm actually talking about narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. And that is a real diagnosable personality disorder, and it's very serious indeed.
So what are the common traits of a narcissist? Well,
I think if there's an awful lot to narcissism, so I'll try and give you a simplified version.
Yeah.
So really, narcissistic personality disorder is a condition of low empathy, and the person has a sense of entitlement and an addiction to feeling special. So these people need to feel special. And those three things, that low empathy, that sense of entitlement and that addiction to feeling special, means that they actually behave in ways which are abusive towards other people. And they do this in order to exploit them for their own gain. So you can see how serious this is already. And that's actually what's going on with narcissism. Now, it's really important to understand that this condition arose because the person had a difficult childhood. So they became wired in a particular way as a result of an adverse upbringing, or an upbringing that they found adverse in some way. So there's no judgment actually at all implied in using this term. Narcissists aren't evil, narcissists aren't bad. This was a condition that developed in childhood as a result of a difficult childhood. But I've talked about the abuse part of it. Really important to understand that all narcissistic abuse is covert psychological abuse. That there's always underlying psychological abuse. There may or may not be physical abuse on top of that as well. And again, the other thing to really get to grips with is that narcissism is a condition of low self-esteem. So underneath whatever exterior the narcissist is putting out to the world, actually they have low self-esteem. And so what they do is they put up an image to the outside world because of this low self-esteem. And that image can be very, very different to how they are actually feeling underneath. So they put up this image, this false image, for the outside world to look at and to believe in. They need external validation. So they need people outside of themselves to to validate that image, that false persona that they've put up. In other words, actually, they need other people to believe in their false persona so that they can believe in it themselves.
So it's to protect them from their own kind of internal low self-esteem and the effects of their childhood.
Exactly that. It's like an armour. It's like a defence, a shield almost. So that false persona protects them from feeling their own true feelings of shame, worthlessness, inadequacy, low self-esteem. So it's really important that they keep that armour up and whole and secure, because they don't want to feel the way that they really feel about each other, about themselves rather. And the point being that for a narcissist, if they actually feel their true feelings, it's actually so bad it's almost like a sort of existential crisis to them. So it's really important that they keep this going. And external validation is the key to keeping it going. And they get that external validation from attention. And they get it from adoration, but they also get it from negative things like drama, like conflict, and in divorce and separation. I'm sure you've seen this yourselves, and they actually get it by instilling fear into people as well. So those are the sort of 5 major ways in which they can actually get that external validation. And that external validation has a name in psychological circles. It's called narcissistic supply. And narcissistic supply is it's like the oxygen that a narcissist needs to sort of emotionally survive. So that they need it all of the time. They need it from a variety of sources. And if you consider that narcissistic supply, if you imagine narcissistic supply being stored in a bucket with a hole in it, it's constantly draining away. And so it needs to be filled from the top all the time from various sources. And so what happens in divorce and separation is that the narcissist has lost their main source of supply. It doesn't matter who got rid of who sort of called time on the relationship. It could be that the narcissist called time on the relationship, but they've lost their spouse, their biggest source of narcissistic supply, and they don't know that any of this is going on. They weren't expecting to feel this way. But of course, if that spouse isn't pouring narcissistic supply into that bucket anymore, the levels of narcissistic supply are going to drop in that bucket. And so that means that their false persona is going to be weakened, because that's what that narcissistic supply does. It keeps that false persona whole. And if their false persona is weakened, they feel awful and they react with rage. So rage is what happens when narcissistic supply drops in that bucket. They react with rage. And of course, that rage does exactly what it needs to do. So, it causes drama, it causes conflict, it instills fear into the onlooker, it gets them attention. So quickly, it brings back those levels of narcissistic supply and makes their sort of armour whole again. So that's what's sort of underlying narcissistic behaviours, and it's really, really important to understand that concept. If there's one concept, I always say this to people, if there's one concept you take away from all of this, it's that concept of narcissistic supply, because that's what's driving all of the narcissist's behaviours, all of them. And also, you asked me what the traits were. Well, we've talked about what the narcissist looks like underneath. They have the low self-esteem, etc. But how do they actually look to the outside world? Because they don't look like that to the outside world. And actually, that's really interesting, because there are 4 major ways in which narcissists present to the outside world. 4 major types. And actually, they can kind of morph between the types. But I think it's quite useful to sort of, to look at these types. So the first type is the exhibitionist narcissist. And that's the type that I think probably most people think about when they think about the word narcissism. So that's the kind of Donald Trump kind of in your face, they're brash, not always though, but they're always extrovert, they're grandiose, they're superior, arrogant, haughty. Think about Donald Trump and the sorts of things that he says. I know better than almost anybody about whatever. I had a client the other day whose very narcissistic ex-wife would write in emails constantly, I am an amazing mother. And that's the kind of thing that you get from narcissists. I'm amazing. I'm better than almost anybody. I know better than anybody else. That's what you get from the exhibitionist narcissist. And then they're charming as well. And they're charismatic as well. I probably shouldn't say this. I might have I might be hit for this. But, Boris Johnson is an exhibitionist narcissist. His outward persona is one of being the sort of bumbling, affable buffoon, but that speaks Latin LinkedIn to show how clever he is. He's a classic narcissist, an exhibitionist narcissist.
Do you think the exhibitionist narcissist is quite prevalent in kind of high-profile figures? Because you've obviously gone straight to former president and prime minister.
Yeah.
You know, like they're absolute top of their field. Yeah. Is that something that's quite common with that particular categorization?
Definitely. I mean, they did studies on, or they looked at personality traits in American presidents, and there was, I can't remember the actual figures, but it was really huge. That they thought that, you know, it was probably around 50% of past American presidents would have qualified, they thought, for a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. So yes, you know, definitely, because they're successful. You know, they're amazing leaders. I mean, you know, people love them, people are drawn to them, they're charismatic, you know, and they get things done because they get other people to do things for them. So yeah, they gravitate towards really high profile jobs. Lots of narcissists in the media as well. You know, and yeah, a great deal of politicians, CEOs are very often exhibitionist narcissists. So yes, it's very, very common in that kind of type of person. Yeah.
And is it possible to have? There was a whole list of traits that you gave there. So some we would class as positive, some we would class as negative. Is it possible to have just the positive traits, or if you have the positive, will you always underlying the negative ones will be there as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Okay. Narcissism is essentially, narcissists are abusive. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, the negative things will be there as well.
Which is very well
narcissists.
hidden.
Yeah, well hidden, because that false persona, that's why they draw people in. Yeah. That false persona is, you know, is good, it's convincing at first. But you've asked that question, and that kind of leads me on to the second type of narcissist, which is actually the devaluing narcissist. Now, the devaluing narcissist is, you see a lot more of the negative stuff with a devaluing narcissist. It's much more, you know, you can see it more clearly because they are openly quite toxic. So they put people down, they ridicule them, they demean them, they shame them, they call them names, you know, they criticize people, and they do that quite openly. That's kind of what you see on the outside. And the reason that they're actually doing this is because in doing so, they inflate their own sense of self-regard, their own ego in comparison. So they put people down in order to make themselves feel better about themselves. And again, Donald Trump beautifully fits into that category. When you think about the name calling, you'd go from hero to zero in 5 seconds flat. That's absolutely classic of a devaluing narcissist, and he could get really quite nasty. Lots of people know devaluing narcissists. They probably just think of them as being really toxic, and they avoid them. But actually, if you look at them through the lens of narcissism, you know, I wonder how many of those people you just think of as being, they're always, you know, telling people that they're horrible or calling people names or criticizing people. How many of those are actually narcissistic?
And for a devaluing narcissist, are they likely to exhibit that behavior to everyone or pretty much everything, or will they hone in on specific, you know, within a relationship? Will it be kind of exclusively directed at a spouse, or how widespread is that?
Well, they can hide it. So as I say, they can move through the different types of narcissists. So if they're in exhibitionist mode, they'll be hiding it, you know, but if they're in devaluing mode, then, you know, everyone gets it, work colleagues. That's the thing about narcissism. Really important to understand this, because I think this does differentiate narcissism from other types of abuse, is that narcissism is described in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, as being a pervasive personality disorder. So in other words, it pervades all parts of their lives. So then they are abusive towards the people that they work with. You know, some people will adore them, the people that they work with. They'll have people that love them. They're sort of, you know, flying monkeys, they're lackeys, you know, but other people will be being abused by them. So they do abuse everyone that they come into contact with. But if you think of a narcissist as being like a sun in a solar system, if you imagine that they've got all these different people in different orbits. So it's the people that are the closest to them, the spouse, the family members. They are the people that are going to feel the heat the most of that sun, of that narcissist. And then as you go out further and further away, you know, obviously you're going to be subjected to the behaviours. You're going to feel the heat less and less, basically. So it's not that, you know, it's not obvious. I mean, if narcissism was obvious, we wouldn't be sitting here, would we? Yeah. It really isn't obvious at all. But the third type of narcissist, speaking of not obvious, this is the type that are so hard to spot. It can take decades, actually, to spot this type. So they're called the closet narcissists, or the covert narcissists, they're also known as. And they don't look like normal narcissists because they're not sort of extrovert. They don't actively seek to hog the limelight. They actually have to go about getting their sense of specialness in really covert ways. So what they do quite often is they tend to associate with people or causes that they think are special. So they do that in order to sort of covertly bask in the reflected specialness of the other person. So they're not obviously, chasing attention or adoration or causing drama and conflict.
But they're riding on the coattails of someone who perhaps gets that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So they're special by association. Not only that, but they use lots of covert methods to get that kind of narcissistic supply, and illness is one of them. So they're very often sort of, they're quite Munchausen's, or they'll use the children as, they'll say that the children have something wrong with them when in fact they don't. And that's a great way of getting attention. It's a great way of causing conflict as well. Narcissists of this type, the closet or covert type, play the victim as well. And that's such a big part of this particular presentation. All narcissists actually play the victim, all of them, particularly in court. But this type is an absolute master at playing the victim.
In what way? How does that come across?
Well, they just the whole world is against them. Nothing's ever good enough. They're quite shy and quiet and self-effacing. This lot as well. So you don't you really don't immediately think of them as being narcissistic. But they'll say things like, "Oh, nobody comes to visit me anymore, and I do so much for everybody, and it's not really appreciated, and I try so hard, and what with my back and my head and my finger, and it's that sort of presentation that you get. And they very often consider themselves to be the wind beneath someone else's wings as well. So if it hadn't been for me, they'd have never have quite made it to those dizzy heights. But they're
kind of like
sort.
powering someone's success and trying to take the glory of that for themselves.
But very, very covertly. And as I say, it's 20 or 30 years that elapses before people go, hang on a minute. It really is, because they seem like quite nice people on the surface. And then that takes me on to the fourth type, who also seem like quite nice people on the surface, because they're the altruistic narcissists. And they get their sense of specialness from actually appearing to be... What they do is they need to be seen to be the most caring, the most kind, the most generous, the most giving. That's how they get their narcissistic supply. I told you I'd be saying narcissistic supply a lot, and I am. That's how they get their sense of specialness. And so, you might think, well, that's nice because they're doing good deeds, surely that's okay. But actually, their motives aren't pure at all. And just like with all the other narcissists, actually, they are abusive under the surface. They're often very territorial about their altruistic endeavours. Really good backstabbers. And you'll find them in all types. You'll find them in religious organisations, charitable organisations, and they're the ones that are constantly doing the sort of, charity marathons, or you might find them on committees, parent-teacher association type of things, And they, as I say, it's really hard initially because you think, well, this person's amazing. They're giving homeless people £20 notes every time they walk past, but actually they are getting narcissistic supply from it. So their motives are not pure at all.
And did you say that people can move through these different types?
Yeah, they can. So most narcissists are one or two in the main of those types. But I have known narcissists who've cycled through all four of the different types. And a lot of my clients tell me that they're so particularly problematic ones seem to be able to change at will, depending really on what's going to bring in the most narcissistic supply at any one time.
And what's the level of consciousness in a narcissist acting in the way that they do? Because it's formed at a young age. So are they conscious? Are they deliberate decisions to act in this way? Or are they acting in a way that they perceive as just normal and that's the way they act?
It's normal for them. So that most narcissists have very, very little awareness, if any, that they are a narcissist or that they're behaving in these ways. They know that they're behaving in the ways that they're behaving, but they don't know why, and it's normal for them. So they don't consider it to be wrong. And if you think about the fact they've got this sense of entitlement, you've talked to me about, you asked me what the traits were, the abuse. We probably need to talk about what the abusive traits are. So the sense of entitlement is one of the huge things that kind of underlies narcissism. So they don't care, if you see what I mean. They feel entitled. They They feel entitled to exploit people. They feel entitled to have certain things. They also feel entitled to not do certain things. So, anything that isn't going to bring in a kind of easy win of narcissistic supply, quite often they're not going to do. They might not do the housework unless they get narcissistic supply from it. They might not, change the baby's nappies or any of those types of things. They might not do the work in the kind of context of a company or whatever, and they might sort of steal other people's work because they feel entitled to do so. So that's a really important point. And that lack of empathy means that they don't care. So narcissists aren't able to put themselves in other people's shoes and actually feel their joy or their pain or any other emotion. And that's what real empathy is. That's what emotional empathy is, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they must be feeling or what they are feeling. But narcissists do have cognitive empathy, which means that with life experience, they can sort of work out, if I was to say, if you said to me, my mum's dead, I'd know if I was even as a narcissist, I would know that's bad. Mum dead, bad. Yeah. Going to
work
say, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
But then I might start joking about, has your dad got onto a dating website or something? I'd be slightly inappropriate with it. So I have a degree of cognitive empathy, which means that I can fool people, but actually I don't have emotional empathy. And what's so important here, particularly in the areas of separation and divorce, is that, if you don't have empathy for someone, true emotional empathy, if you can't feel what they're feeling, then you can't care about them. You can't care about what they're feeling and how they're feeling. So you can keep going at them, which narcissists do, over and over and over again, relentlessly going at them without caring about what that's actually doing to, the mother or father of your children, the person that you were married to for 20 years, because you can't care. It's not so much that you don't care, it's that you can't care.
So that brings us on to talking about divorce specifically. So what is different if you are divorcing a narcissist as to you divorcing someone who isn't a narcissist?
Yeah. Well, you can already see, can't you, that there are issues here.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. I think we can certainly establish that. Yeah.
So one of the other things that's problematic. So we've already talked about narcissistic rage. So we've talked about the fact that when the spouse goes away, the levels of narcissistic supply in the bucket have dropped. Therefore, the narcissist is going to react with rage. That's not good in the divorce context. We've talked about the fact that they have no empathy for that spouse, so that's not good. But really, I think another thing that's really important is this concept of splitting. So splitting is a psychological term, and what it means is that narcissists are unable to see people as a blend of good and bad. They're unable to kind of integrate kind of liked and disliked parts of people into one kind of stable picture. So what I mean by that is they have a tendency to see people as either all good or all bad.
So it's you're with us or you're against us.
So you're either on the pedestal and you're marvellous. I mean, we talked about Donald Trump. He every time he hired someone, they were the best person in the world. Then when he fired them, they were just a loser or whatever. They were the worst, hero to zero, Now that has real ramifications in divorce because, you are no longer all good, you are all bad, which means that the narcissist is just going to come after you. And unfortunately, people who are divorcing real narcissists, people with narcissistic personality disorder, actually get the sense that they're being annihilated. And I always use that word because it's the perfect word to describe what it feels like. A narcissist will come at you and try to annihilate you, and they'll try and annihilate you emotionally, financially, spiritually, whatever level they've got to work with, they will try to annihilate you. And the vast majority of people who are divorcing a narcissist will tell you that they actually felt as if the narcissist was almost trying to drive them to suicide. So that's how bad it is. It really, really is extremely difficult. So that results in them doing all sorts of things, playing all sorts of games, all about getting that narcissistic supply as well. So they will financially abuse you. They'll lie. So they'll go to court and they'll say, I can't work anymore, or I've got this illness, or, I'm retiring, or whatever. They won't give that full and frank kind of financial disclosure. They won't tell you about the company that they've got. They will take money, a few £100,000 from a joint account, a mortgage account maybe, and they'll spend it, or they'll give it away. They'll hide money. They'll buy people lavish gifts to reduce the money in the financial pot. They'll run up credit card debts on your behalf that you're jointly liable for. for. So on a financial front, they'll do all of those things and more. Things that I couldn't possibly even think of. I mean, I'm constantly surprised. It's amazing.
Yeah.
A narcissist's ability to manipulate is, I mean, it's wired in. So they're 10 steps ahead of, the normal person, the non-narcissistic person, and it's remarkable to actually see how quick they are at coming up with strategies. So financial abuse is obviously a huge part of it. Really important to mention that they will use the lawyer as a tool of financial abuse as well. So they'll use the non-narcissistic spouse's lawyer as a tool of narcissism. So they'll bombard them with correspondence that's irrelevant, accusatory, and then unfortunately a lawyer who doesn't really know what they're doing will respond to those accusations at whatever their hourly rate is. And that carries on for a long time, and that really does run up costs for the non-narcissistic spouse. So they're using the legal system and the lawyers as a weapon of narcissistic abuse, as a weapon of financial abuse.
So to deal with that then, as a lawyer, the best thing is presumably not to rise to the bait, and not to give that supply, and not to go, how dare you, this is outrageous, because that's only going to lead to more. So you just...
It's hard though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think clients find it really hard, because sometimes we will get letters in and I'll say it's not relevant to the issue that we're dealing with, so let's just ignore it. But they feel like they have to they have to be heard on with their response as well.
Clients think that if you don't respond to an allegation, you accept it as being true.
Exactly. And you can say we don't accept the allegations that your client has laid out as being true. However, we wish to concentrate on the matter in hand. You don't have to address them directly. But the problem is that people going to court for the first time don't realise that the judge doesn't care about any of that he said, she said stuff, and they want to clear their names. They want to they want to say, I didn't do that. I'm not a prostitute. I'm not an abusive person. I'm, whatever they're being accused of, that they want to clear their names, and they don't want the judge thinking badly of them. They're seeing it sort of, evolving to a final hearing and thinking the judge is going to think badly of me, and I'm going to have a really bad outcome as a result of this because of these accusations that are being made against me. But in responding, as you rightly say, you're giving them narcissistic supply. You're feeding them, and that will just make things worse. So, in fact, in not giving them narcissistic supply, if the lawyer or actually your client, your non-narcissistic spouse, in not giving the narcissistic supply, the narcissist needs narcissistic supply, because it's draining away. There's a hole in that bucket. So they've got to get it from somewhere. It just won't be you. If you go, sorry, not giving you narcissistic supply, consistently not going to do it, no matter how much you prod, then they have to go somewhere else. So the sad thing is they will then go and find someone else to get their supply from. But that, unfortunately, is the way that it has to be.
I guess lesson one is not to rise to the bait and to get involved in these narcissistic supply-inducing arguments. What are the tips do you have for lawyers or for clients going through divorce proceedings if there's a narcissist on the other side?
Well, firstly, for clients, I'd like them to have a lawyer who understands narcissistic personality disorder deeply. I think that's really, really important, because you might have a really lovely lawyer who doesn't quite get it, and they'll do their best for you. And actually, the types of people who get into narcissistic relationships are the types of people who go, oh, but they're really nice, so I'll give them a chance. And £50,000 later, they won't be quite so thrilled at having given that lawyer a chance. So it's really important that they ask their lawyer what they understand by the term narcissistic personality disorder. And if they don't understand, if they haven't come out with some of the things that I've come out with, then they don't understand it deeply enough to be able to help, to be able to be effective. So that's the first thing. Have they had any training? Have they read any books on it? What do they understand by it? And they need to really find someone that does understand. So that's the first thing. Communication is everything. So we've already talked about not responding to certain things that don't need to be responded to. But also that's the same for the spouse themselves. So they're going to be getting emails, WhatsApps, messages on every possible text, bombarding, that they're going to be bombarded with ranting, accusatory, nonsensical messages, and they're going to come thick and fast, and they need to not be frightened by those. every time the narcissist does that, they're pushing their buttons. They're tipping them into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is the fourth response. Lots of victims of narcissistic abuse, when they're fight, flight, or when that system is activated, fawn. So they go, oh, I'll do whatever you want, and okay, let's do this, and that's their natural response very often. So they're being prodded and tipped into one of those 4 responses, which is terrifying for them. So they need to learn to sort of actually, feel what's actually going on here. What's going on with me? Am I going into fight? Am I going into flight? Am I going into freeze? Am I sort of just like, don't know what to do? Or am I then now wishing to kind of fawn and, do whatever the narcissist wants? Just noticing that and going, oh, they've done that. They've pushed my buttons. They've activated my amygdala. That's the bit of the brain that's doing all of this. That's what's going on here, and just knowing that is actually quite helpful. And so not responding in the moment and thinking, okay, I need to sort of take a time out. I need to calm down. I need to go away, and then I need to come back and look at these messages and actually decide what actually requires a response. And we actually, in our book, we've got a really long, characteristically ranting email. And what we do with that is we actually take that email, we copy and paste it into a child's 5-year-old handwriting font. And then you can look at it again and go, oh, because emotionally, that's what the narcissist is. It's a 5-year-old chucking their toys out of the pram. That's what's going on here. And if you can see that, suddenly when you reread it, you think, oh, I actually don't need to respond to that. You can have a 3-page email of ranting that seems really frightening when it's, when it's coming from an adult. But it's not when it's coming from a 5-year-old. And there might only be one thing you need to respond to, like, I agree that we'll pick up the children at 3 p.m. can be the answer to, to all of that. So you really need to hone in on what's actually important. Don't let the narcissist emotionally don't react emotionally or don't let them see you emotionally react to them. Don't even put things like, I am disappointed by your email, or I am saddened that you choose to think that of me. No emotion whatsoever.
So keep it bland, keep it
totally neutral. And the same, use as few words as possible. Just really keep it tight. Don't be rude. But don't be friendly. Don't kind of, pander to them and put smiley faces. Just keep it absolutely neutral. No narcissistic supply at all. It needs to read with no narcissistic supply. Get a friend to look at it, before you send it. Because really, they can take because there'll be passive-aggressive things that you've shoved in there thinking you're being a bit clever. You need to take that stuff out. So a friend can help you with that to start with until you get better at it. But equally, in person, if you have to see a narcissist in person, hopefully you won't. Hopefully you can avoid that. But if you see them face to face, there's a similar type of thing that you can do to try to reduce the narcissistic supply that they get, so they don't keep coming at you. And that's called the grey rock technique. And what you do is you become as boring to the narcissist as a grey rock. So you need to be really, really dull. So essentially you need to go Mr. Spock. You need to be completely devoid of emotion, no facial expressions. Don't raise your eyebrows or roll your eyes. Keep guardianship of those eyebrows. They'll be saying outrageous things to you to try and get you to respond. Nothing, Speak in a monotone. So don't vary your voice and get it all excited. Slow down your speech. You want to sound almost robotic. I mean, it sounds crazy, this. And it's really difficult to do.
It must be so hard, especially after...
really hard.
Yeah, you've been married to this person for God knows how long, and now you're acting like a robot.
You've been acting in a certain way, which has always been to give narcissistic supply.
Yeah.
And then to suddenly shut that off, that must be a real challenge.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult to do. Don't make eye contact with them, so you're sort of looking over here. Don't even make eye contact with them. Can you imagine how, we're social animals, and you feel like an idiot for doing it. You feel like you're being mean, and people are judging you. Oh, she's so awful, you need to just grow up and treat them like an adult. But they don't understand that there's a personality disorder going on here, and that doesn't work. Treating them as if they don't have a personality disorder doesn't work. So, monotone, slow speech. If you've said any more than yes or no, you've probably said too much. Really limit what you're saying to them and get the hell out of there as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, we've talked about the fact that it's a personality disorder, and all the traits that are there. And it's such a buzzword at the moment. You only have to look at social media and it's kind of being thrown around a little bit. How is this properly diagnosed? Who does that? Who do you go to for help with that?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. It is possible to get it diagnosed, but it is difficult to get it diagnosed. Most clinical psychologists are not trained in getting personality disorder diagnosed, in learning how to diagnose personality disorders. Most psychiatrists aren't, doctors aren't, and I was a former GP. We weren't trained. I know very few GPs who know anything about personality disorders, in particular narcissistic personality disorder, and I know very few psychiatrists. This is shocking, but I know very few psychiatrists who have any understanding at all of narcissistic personality disorder, with the exception of forensic psychiatrists. So how do you get it diagnosed? I mean, that's... you probably need to step back and think, well, do we need to get it diagnosed? That's the first thing, because there are so few professionals that will actually do it. Do you need to get it diagnosed? Is it not enough for you to know and your lawyer to know that they're a narcissist? So that's the first thing. But if you do need to get it diagnosed, really complicated cases, it is possible for a judge to direct for a diagnosis, a psychological evaluation, specifically has to include a diagnosis of looking at for personality disorders as well. Otherwise, you'll get them going, well, I looked at everything, they seem absolutely fine, I didn't check for personality disorders. Yeah. So they've got to specifically look for personality disorders. When a judge is asking, is going to direct for a personality disorder or psychological evaluation, they need to know why they're asking for it. What am I going to gain from this? How does this actually affect the outcome? What is the effect on this family of having an actual diagnosis, and on the case? So in other words, their capacity to tell the truth. Narcissists don't tell the truth. The truth to a narcissist is what they say it is at the time that they're saying it. Gaslighting is a very common thing that narcissists do as well. So, a judge needs to be aware of that. That will tell a judge that they're lying in court, or that they're probably lying in court. Also, a capacity to parent. I'm afraid to say that narcissists do not make good parents. They're unable to see their children as anything other than extensions of themselves. So they can't consider their needs, their wants. A child has to be what the narcissist wants them to be. They should have what the narcissist wants them to have. They can't actually look at the child's needs. They don't really see them as individuals, and they need them to be perfect as well. So very often they will ignore things like illnesses, asthma, really quite dangerous things. I'll say, no, you haven't got asthma. You don't start breathing properly. You don't need an inhaler, and they'll withhold. Very commonly they will withhold inhalers, medication.
That's frightening, isn't it?
It is absolutely terrifying. They won't put bike helmets on children. I hear that almost every day, and the other parent is absolutely, doing their nut because, it's just unsafe. But a judge will be able, that diagnosis will tell that judge that is the case. It's what is, with this diagnosis, what is the what's the outcome? What does it actually mean for the family?
And the impact on the children.
Yeah.
But in terms of children, how do you co-parent? Presumably you can't co-parent with a narcissist. How do you work it when your children are moving between two houses and the narcissist is having an impact and he's getting narcissistic supply from the children? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to co-parent with a narcissist. But you do have more power, actually, than perhaps you might think you have. Because even if you are the parent that's not having the children for the majority of the time, you still have an enormous amount of power, actually, because you get to model empathy. You get to see the child as an individual, and consider the wants and needs of that child. What do you want for your birthday? I'd like a scooter, please. Now a narcissist will say, no, you don't. You want an electric bike. That's what they'll say. Very commonly. But it's that sort of. It's that simple. So hearing that child, treating that child as an individual. Validating that child. Invalidation is a huge part of narcissism. They invalidate people all the time. They invalidate their feelings, they invalidate their memories, they invalidate their beliefs. They just invalidate all the time. So validating that child is really, really important. And teaching them empathy as well. So teaching them to think about how other people might be feeling. So even if they're if you're reading a bedtime story to a child, you know, how do you think that character was feeling at that time? Teaching them lots of different words, you know, not just kind of happy or sad, but, you know, let's go deeper than that. Disappointed, desperate, elated, joyful, you know, emotional granularity is what that's called, where you really specify the actual
Presumably
emotion.
That's harder for a narcissist to differentiate between those subtle distinctions between emotions if they're only doing it on a kind of cognitive level.
Exactly. So if you can teach a child all these different, you know, really, really sort of deep emotions, and actually teach them specific emotions and what they are and how other people might be feeling, then essentially you're teaching them empathy, and you're teaching them how to express themselves, and how to, and therefore that you can then hear them, you know. So you're stopping them from becoming a narcissist. Essentially, if you can teach a child empathy, you can stop them from becoming a narcissist, because narcissists don't have empathy by definition. And also the child will come to see who the parent who they want to be with, who they want to trust. You know, they come to see over time, you know, they vote with their feet. They get to sort of 14, 15, and they do vote with their feet. Very definitely. That happens all the time. So you've got to sort of, you asked me, how do you cope with this narcissist that's sort of just doing all this stuff when the children are with them? You have to accept it. Parallel parenting is the model that we suggest people use. So don't try and even co-parent with a narcissist. Parallel parenting is where the rules of the different houses apply wherever the child is staying. So, I'm afraid if it's no bike helmets at dad's house or mum's house, it's no bike helmets. There's absolutely nothing, because you need to have as little communication, preferably none, with the narcissist at all. And if you do, just on the child-related things, in order to, again, reduce the narcissistic supply that you're giving them, so that you can heal, so that you can be a better parent to the children when you have them. So you have to really practice radical acceptance. It's incredibly difficult.
And is that something you help the people that you work with to do? Because, from speaking with clients, the very idea of not caring what goes on in the other house.
Well, you do care.
But being able to cut off and think, I won't worry about what's going on in the other house.
I think you're always going to worry. We have to be realistic here. You're always going to worry. It's never going to be, the narcissist, once the divorce is finalised, etc., they're never going to be able to come in for a cup of tea, and, you're never going to be able to have they counter-parent. Narcissists counter-parent. They do the opposite of what you want. Even things like choosing secondary schools, they'll want the one that you don't want, that the child doesn't want either. It's all of those things. So there's always going to be difficulties, and you have to that's kind of what you have to accept, really. And it's how you manage yourself, because that's all you can manage. How do you manage yourself for the next however many years it's going to be till that child is 18 years old? It's really, really difficult. So you asked me if I help people with that, and I help people with all of this from the very beginning, from before they've even sort of realised that they want to get a divorce. Is my spouse a narcissist? All the way through, and even into post-separation narcissistic abuse as well, post-divorce narcissistic abuse. Because if you don't manage the narcissist the way in the way that we've been talking about, reducing narcissistic supply, if you haven't learned to do that, then the abuse will continue, for years. So you've really got to get a grip on it and a handle on it.
So while you're going through the divorce process, then, what are the worst things that you can do if you're divorcing a narcissist?
Right, number one, don't tell the narcissist that they're a narcissist.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's really hard, though, isn't it? I think clients really struggle with that.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, if you tell the narcissist that they're a narcissist, they're going to tell you that you're one. They're going to tell you that you're bipolar or you're borderline or whatever. And they'll tell their lawyer, I think they're a narcissist. It's just not going to help. Don't go there. You've got an advantage here. They're a narcissist. Why would you tell them that? We've written a book which is basically a manual to the narcissist's head. Don't sort of tell them. They'll go and read that book. You don't want them to know that you know. So keep it from them unless you've got no choice. And so that's the first thing. Secondly, the issue with court is that judges, certainly in the lower courts, aren't trained in narcissistic personality disorder, or rather, most of them aren't, the vast majority. They're not going to recognise narcissistic personality disorder when they see it. The narcissist loves going to court. You know, they get the opportunity to stand up there and be centre stage. And the victim playing narcissist is, you know, amazing, sort of, you know, crumbling, and it's all just awful. And, you know, they're just so convincing. It's a really dangerous place to be. So you don't actually want to be telling your judge either that you're dealing with a narcissist, unless things have got so bad that you're actually requesting a psychological evaluation, and then obviously that's something you're going to have to do. But, you know, don't tell the narcissist that they're a narcissist, and don't tell the judge, because at the moment it will just backfire. I'm trying to think what else would be a really bad thing to do.
What about things like when you're pursuing financial disclosure? Because I can't think of anything less likely to give narcissistic supply than handing over copies of bank statements and things.
Yeah.
And because it's fundamentally invasive and there's no advantage to them. There's only disadvantage to them doing it. Presumably non-disclosure is fairly common. And how do you deal with that with a narcissist?
Yeah, non-disclosure is really common. I think you really have to step back and look at this. You know, is the best financial outcome actually what you're after here? Are you prepared to, you know, to fight this, costing you, you know, more than tens of thousands of pounds, possibly even into the hundreds of thousands of pounds, in order to get the best financial outcome? You know, really what you need is to look at you need to look at this in a more holistic way, getting out of this relationship so that you can be a better parent, so that you can move forwards in your life, so that you can heal, so you can not invite this into your life again, is actually what you need to be doing, really. And so actually expecting the narcissist, you're not going to get a forensic accountant to look at stuff. It's not going to happen. You've almost got to, again, I talk about radical acceptance. You've kind of got to accept that they're going to win in terms of the money. But a narcissist needs to feel as if they have won. And so actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You need to almost let them win at something.
You need to tee it up so they make the final offer and you accept the offer, so they feel like they've got their thing at the
last
end,
word.
even if you knew you were planning that.
Yeah, you need to give them the last word. So you need to think about how you're negotiating so that you end up giving them something that they think you wouldn't give them. You know, because then at least you go into the sort of the future relationship with them. Presumably, you know, I mean, most people here would be parents. So, you know, listening to this would be parents going into that future co-parenting relationship with them with at least sort of less narcissistic rage. At least they're feeling superior and special, and they can tell everybody that they did really well and you did really badly. So that works quite well. But in terms of actually expecting that you're going to you know, you're going to get full and frank financial disclosure, you're probably not. And it'll be late and you'll be applying for penal notices, and this just goes on and on and on. But you know, people also think, and I've heard this so many times, because people think, oh, my spouse is a narcissist, I'm going to fight them, I'm going to go all the way through the courts with this, I'm going all the way through. And you think, my God, you know, you think you're going to get justice.
Again.
Well, not only that, and of course it does, it absolutely gives them narcissistic supply, but, you know, they think they're going to get justice in court. They think they're going to get fairness in court. They think they're going to get retribution for the narcissist's bad behaviour. But they don't. Yeah. They don't, because the judges aren't kind of, you know, equipped to do that. They don't have time for that. It's, you know, it's a sledgehammer, isn't it, really? So we try to tell people, and this is one of my best tips, is try to stay out of court. And if you can, do hybrid mediation or arbitration. Those are the two things that I think are really important for people to understand. You know, your court is not going to help you. The narcissist may well fool a judge, or the judge won't be interested, or the judge, you know, they do a really great job, but they don't, you know, they are totally pressurized and underfunded, and there's just too many cases going through. Really, they don't have time to really look at the case in the detail that perhaps this kind of case needs to be looked at. So you're not really, and plus you've got this wonderful convincing narcissist on the stand. You know, if you can avoid it, do. So hybrid mediation is the method that we recommend people go for, which is different to normal mediation. Normal mediation, classic mediation, doesn't work with narcissists. And, you know, lawyers should really not be pushing their clients into mediation. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It feeds into the delays because they have their mediation. The narcissist goes, oh, yes, well, maybe I will let you have that. Yeah, maybe we will do that. And then they just change their minds. They shift, the goalpost shifting, massive thing with narcissists. So you really need to try and avoid normal mediation. But hybrid mediation, we estimate, and Karen Walker, my co-author, is obviously an expert in this. She thinks that about 80% of all cases resolve in hybrid mediation with narcissists. So if where a narcissist is involved. So, I mean, those that you can't argue with those figures.
Yeah.
You know, so really that's the way to go. You've got your lawyer with you in a room, the narcissist has got their lawyer with them in a room, and then you've got a specialist hybrid mediator who's different to a normal mediator in that they can hold confidences. So you can, because a normal mediator, if you say, I think they're a narcissist, that mediator then has to go to your spouse and say, she thinks you're a narcissist, you know, game over, you know. So, you know, but you can say that to a hybrid mediator, and you can say, look, I'm prepared to only take 40% of the house or whatever. You can give them your lowest, you know, the lowest thing that you will accept, and they can hold that in their minds and negotiate. And the narcissist can do the same, and they can actually, because they're holding that confidence, it's very, very different to normal mediation. They can actually negotiate an outcome for you that is actually acceptable. And narcissists actually quite like it because it's special, you know, it's new and it's exciting, and they're kind of early adopters of stuff, and they've got their lawyer there, and then they've got this mediator, and they can play this game, and they can manipulate, and or so they think. But actually they're much less able to do that in the hybrid mediation process, and perhaps they think.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we could listen to you talk all day. I just wonder if, let's leave it on a positive note. It'd be great to hear about how people can survive and thrive after narcissistic abuse, because, I mean, it sounds just dreadful, doesn't it? So it'd be really great to hear about some positive ways that people can come out of it. Your clients have come out of things at the end of the process.
Yeah, I think, you know, people always talk about divorce in terms of winning and losing. If you've divorced a narcissist, actually you have won. That's the first thing. You know, you have won. And it depends on what drew you to that narcissist. There's a lot to look at when you come out of a narcissistic relationship. Why were you attracted to the narcissist? Why was the narcissist attracted to you? There's a lot to look at in yourself so that you don't attract the same type again, or so that you're not attracted to the same type again. But, you know, healing is absolutely possible after narcissistic abuse, but it's a journey. You've really got to look at yourself. You've really got to sort of be aware of the person that you are. What predisposed you to this? You know, did you have a narcissistic parent? There's a wonderful expression, you find the person whose teeth fit your wounds. And very, very commonly, that's what happens to people. You know, they've come from a narcissistic family system. They've grown up in it. They've thought of narcissism as normal. It's their normal. So they've been attracted to another narcissist. So there's all of that to look at. There's all of that to deal with. You may also have to have therapy because you may have a thing called complex PTSD. So that's important as well. If you do, you've got to get the right therapist. Again, as I've said, psychologists, a lot of them don't know what narcissism is really. So you need one that does. You need one that's trauma focused. So you know, that's really, really important. And there are certain types of therapy that do work with complex PTSD. But healing from narcissistic abuse is the most beautiful thing. And it is absolutely the most beautiful thing. It's not linear. You know, do you ever heal completely? I think you probably do, but you can still always be triggered by the narcissist. I think even if you fully heal, they still know which buttons to push. But it is the most incredible thing. And people always, one person actually in particular, described it to me, the process of healing or having healed as being able to sort of look out of a window for the first time with it actually being clear. It was like it was foggy before, but they never really knew. And now they look out at the world through this kind of clear window. And actually the growth that is possible, the evolution that is possible as a person, you know, even in terms of your consciousness, this is all really kind of, you know, I mean, it's, you know, this stuff might not make a lot of sense to people unless they've actually been through it. But really, you can thrive and you can grow and you can evolve from narcissistic abuse. You know, post-traumatic growth is the flip side of trauma. And you can have post-traumatic growth. And actually, you can live your life happier and freer than most people who haven't even had any type of abuse in their lives. You know, it's actually, bizarrely, it's the strangest thing, but it can be seen as a gift because it shows you your wounds and it enables you to be able to heal them over.
That's really fascinating. Thank you so much, Supriya, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
You can find out more about all the work that Supriya does to support people in a relationship with or separating from a narcissist and her work with family lawyers at thelifedoctor.org.
If you are at any immediate risk from domestic abuse, please call the police. You can also access help and support from the 24-hour National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 24/7. please do reach out for help if you need it.
This is the last episode of Stowe Talks in this series, but we will be back with a new series soon where we will cover topics including economic abuse, ADHD in relationships, coercive control, and dealing with post-separation abuse.
So, thanks for joining. We hope you found it helpful and informative.
If you would like more information on future videos, our podcast series and programme of webinars, head over to stowetalks.co.uk where you can sign up for our email list as well as check out our previous episodes and forthcoming events. And please do rate, like, share and review this episode where you can.
Thank you and see you next time.